The sugya of mitzdayer, it's a sugya that starts out with a kaishi. The whole concept, the whole basis for the sugya is that there's a case that a person is mitzdayer and therefore he's pater from the sukkah. We know that when it comes to mitzvah, l'fum tzara agra, we know that avifel the pain, or I don't mean pain in the conventional sense, but avifel that the person pushes himself for the mitzvah, that's a virtue, that's a maila. Tircha for a mitzvah is a tremendous maila. Rashi Kedushin Daf Mem Beis says that Adarabba, a person should do a mitzvah by Yosef b'shluchai, because when his body is oisik in the mitzvah, he's toreach in the mitzvah, it's a much more chaviv dik mitzvah by the HaLACHAH b'shefer. So what's this that we come to our sugya over here with this new concept? I mean, Steyer is potter from the sukkah. Is it? I ask you a question, Rabbi Isai. A person he ate in the sukkah, and it started to rain. So for Shteitzach, he went inside. It's raining, and he finished his meal already. He's waiting for the rain to stop, and he sees the rain's not stopping. No, he asks his Rav, "Do I have to bench in the sukkah?" So the Rav says, "Of course you have to bench in the sukkah. No, even though it could be b'di'evid if you would bench elsewhere, you yotzei. But is there any heter of mitzdayer, potter from Birchas Hamazon? Could you imagine such a tsar? He's sitting there benching, and the rain is pouring down, geasing down on his head, and we know that the halacha is borer, and so says the Sefer the Birchas Abayis. Of course, he has to bench in the sukkah. Why not? He's mitzdayer. Mitzdayer isn't mitzdayer potter from sukkah, but I guess mitzdayer is not potter from benching. We know the Shulchan Aruch in Tafayin Beis and Sif Yud says there's no heter of mitzdayer by mitzvahs. Rabbi Yoin had a headache from Sukkot all the way to mamish to the next yontif. So and I'll ask you another question. Wasn't that the mitzias? Certainly after the war, certainly people lived in Williamsburg. They lived in these 15-story tenements, these apartment buildings. They shared a communal sukkah, and people had to walk down and schlep 15 flights of stairs. He had to schlep down 15 flights of stairs, and he would go to the sukkah. And would anybody say that he was potter? Yeah, he was matriach me'oid in order to get down those 15 flights of stairs and up the 15 flights of stairs in order to get to the sukkah. But we understand that that's the tzura of the mitzvah. Isn't the tzura of the mitzvah in essence itself a tircha? Isn't that what the Rishonim and the Paiskim, the Taz, others, Torah, they explain to us that why is it that the mitzvah of sukkah is dafka at this time of the year, where it's not as comfortable outside, hagufa, so that it should be more nicker, that you're doing it for the purpose of the mitzvah, but the entire mitzvah itself is a little bit not so comfortable. I prefer the comfort of my bed. I certainly prefer the comfort of my house, etc. Outside, there's a reason that we build houses. So isn't the whole mitzvah of sukkah, doesn't it have within it a certain aspect of tircha and a certain aspect of, I suppose, pain, and a person has to push a little bit for the mitzvah? Don't we know that that's the reason why the Rebbeinu Shalom has such a chavivus to Klal Yisrael, is because we push for the mitzvahs. We want extra mitzvahs. And over here we find something shocking. The Ramah brings down, it's famous, that a person that he would sit in the sukkah and he's potter because mitzdayer, potter min sukkah. If he would sit anyways, he's called a hediot, he's called a fool. Hashem doesn't want that mitzvah. Why? Isn't he going above and beyond? He's going above and beyond the call of duty. So a person that would go above and beyond, isn't that the trademark of Klal Yisrael? Doesn't it say that why is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisa Panav, Hashem is Noisei Panav, so the Gemara in Brachas tells us in Daf Chav? Because how could I not be Noisei Panav to Klal Yisrael? I asked them to bench on a kebeya, on a svia, and they bench already on a kazayas. So you see, they go the extra mile. And because of that, we get chen from Hashem Yisparach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us what we call nepotism. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us favoritism because of the fact that we go above and beyond. We go the extra mile. So the whole premise, the whole basis for the sugya, the starting point of the sugya, is it's against our hashkafa. Person's supposed to go the extra mile. He's supposed to push for the mitzvah. It's supposed to be tricha the mitzvah. So let's start with a very, very shocking shaila. Maybe there's no heter of mitzdayer, potter min sukkah. And the truth is that there seems to be basis for that. The Magen Avraham in Siman Tafresh Mem, he brings in a Yerushalmi about Rav Huna, who wouldn't drink even on the derech. He had all the pturim, helche derech, and it's only water, and he wouldn't drink until he found the sukkah. Wasn't he mitzdayer? It seems to be there were clearly Amoraim that had this chumrah that there was no mitzdayer pater from the sukkah. More so, let's say a person would say, I find it too difficult to build a sukkah. You know what it is? I have to build a sukkah all the way down the block, etc. Some Sefer says, of course you'd have to build a sukkah. Even more shocking. There's no Mishnah that says mitzdayer pater min sukkah. There's a Mishnah that says rain is pater min sukkah. There's a Mishnah that says when it rains pater min sukkah. There's a Mishnah that says that when a person is a chayla, so then he's pater from the sukkah, and Meshamshim are pater min sukkah. Okay, we can mention, like I mentioned last time, if somebody has a baby, maybe this is what to talk about. He needs to help his wife, etc. Maybe she's a chayla if she just had a baby, the first month for sure, and maybe he has to be mishamisher to help her with the baby, etc. But there's no Mishnah that seems to say mitzdayer pater min sukkah, and there would seem to be an understandable basis for that. That's our kol Kulas. We try to go above and beyond the extra mile. Why should we say because you're mitzdayer, you're pater min sukkah? The Gemara in Sukkah Daf Chavav. Finally, there's a little bit of a glimpse to our Shaila. The Gemara brings down that Rav allowed Rav Acha to sleep outside the sukkah because of the mosquitoes, which is, of course, it's very difficult to sleep. And it seems that Rav allowed Rav Acha. Now, already, it's quite intriguing. Over here, it just says that Rav allowed Rav Acha to sleep outside the sukkah. What happened to eat outside the sukkah? It should say Rav allowed Rav Acha to be outside the sukkah, eating, sleeping. What's this lashon that Rav allowed Rav Acha to eat out, to sleep outside the sukkah? As a matter of fact, something also very interesting. It says over there that Rav Acha sat in a canopy inside the sukkah, which is stam interesting. Why didn't he just go in the house? Maybe we'll come back to this. But the Akapanim, it doesn't mention about eating pater min sukkah. Then the Gemara brings down that there was a bad odor. Oh, and finally, the Gemara tells us, so therefore, mitzdayer is pater min sukkah from a bad odor. But over there, it's talking about sleeping. It's not talking about eating. Again, then the Gemara continues and says, chayla and mishamshim are pater. Okay, and it's mashma effect the Gemara that a mitzdayer is chayiv. Sounds like that only chaylim have this ptur, and only perhaps mishamshim are pater. No, what's the kasha? What's the kasha? The Gemara, but mitzdayer would be. It sounds like but mitzdayer would be chayiv. What's the Gemara's kasha? Don't we know there's a Mishnah that says that rain is a ptur from the sukkah? If it's raining, it's pater from the sukkah. So why not? What are you asking about mitzdayer? Ask straight from the Mishnah. It says chayla is pater from the sukkah. Mashma only a chayla, but rain is chayiv in a sukkah. What's this going on here that mitzdayer isn't the Mishnah? What's going on here that it seems that rain is even more pashit? Then the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara goes on, and the Gemara seems to say an avil is chayiv. Avil Rahman al-Islan, he's chayiv in the mitzvah of sukkah. So the Gemara says pshita. Of course, why should an avil be pater? An avil maybe on the first day.
Perhaps put the Gemara up on the screen.
Maybe an avil is pater from tefillin, and perhaps an avil is allowed to learn certain things, etc. But upon him, what's this? That an avil is pater. What was the havamina that an avil should be pater? An avil is chayiv in the mitzvah of sukkah. So the Gemara says, because he's mitzdayer. Oh, so tsar. Oh, we know about tsar. Tsar seems to be a ptor when it comes to sukkah. So, in fact, the Gemara that he has tsar. So, since he has tsar, maybe that should be the reason that he's pater from the mitzvah of sukkah. Says the Gemara, kamash malon. No, why? Says the Gemara, because iboile suvi adaite. There was a havamina that he's pater, but kamash malon. That no, you're an avil. Now it's the mitzvah of sukkah. You have to get yourself together. And therefore, it seems to be that he doesn't have this p'tur, which is again intriguing. He is bitzar. He has to calm himself down. A regular person doesn't have to calm himself down. What's going on? The Gemara in Kov Chesed Mebei says, a sukkah, all the relaxation and everything that you do should be done in the sukkah. Learning, if you're able to do, etc. The Gemara goes on and says, wait, but learning, it's too difficult to do in the sukkah. One mandama says you're pater, one mandama says you're chayz. The Gemara says, not a machlekes. Habi Ian and habi bekiyas. In other words, Ian, you're mitzdayer, so therefore you're pater. Oh, so now we're getting a glimpse. It seems to be that to learn in the sukkah, if it's too difficult, you're not mechuyev to learn in the sukkah. Then the Gemara goes on in Chav Tes, and the Gemara brings down that Rabbi Yosef was an istidus. And he was very troubled. There were pieces of schach that were falling in. Many people don't know what this is, because today you buy the bamboo, and if the bamboo starts falling in, you got bigger problems. But in the Haim, so what did it used to be? You used to buy the evergreens and everything here in Eretz Yisrael still have it. They have these trees and everything and whatnot. And they used to fall in. So Rabbi Yosef was very troubled that parts of the schach would fall in. He was very bothered that parts of the Schach would fall in. And the Gemara says that he was potter because he's an istinus. Again, intriguing. It sounds like a mitzdayer is potter, not so pashit. Rabbi Yosef is an istinus, so he's a mitzdayer, therefore he's going to be considered an istinus, and therefore it bothers him. There's a Yerushalmi in Beis Yod that talks about mosquitoes and the heat and etc., and says that these things are all potter. So what is going on here? Well, now that the dust has settled, we see that it seems to be rain is a simple p'tur. It seems to be chaylim is also a simple p'tur. It seems to be mitzdayer patim in a sukkah. We have makairis for at least sleeping. We don't have a mefurish gemara about not eating based on mitzdayer. And all kol zeh oimed darsheni, especially with the first question that we asked. That l'chayra mitzdayer, that's the greatest chavivas of the mitzvahs, when a person is mitzdayer for the mitzvah. What does it say? That we should, that when Rashi says in the beginning of Dvarim, Klal Yisrael should have said to Moshe Rabbeinu, we want to learn from you, Moshe. You were the one that had tsar for the Torah. So it's better to learn from that person. So the mitzvah that's done with tsar is even better. So what's the pshat? So Tosfos in Sukkah, and HaRav, he says the Yesod, he's talking over there by HILCHOS, and he says of the Yesod, Teishvu ke'ein taduru. And the Yesod Adavar is that even in the house, if a person is mitzdayer, he would leave his house, which already that has to give us a little bit of focus. In other words, the idea of the p'tur of mitzdayer patim in HaSukkah is because you have to live the way you would normally live. And therefore, if you have to live the way you would normally live, so then you're not being mekayim the mitzvah. Oh, what was your kasha? That l'char mitzdayer is a mila in the mitzvah, but the mitzvah is live in this place the way you would live in your house. But let's say I was in my house and it was dripping in, so then I would leave that part of my house. Maybe I'd leave my house, etc. If it was dripping in, or if it was raining, or if it was star and whatever, would you leave your house? So Teishvu ke'ein taduru says you have to don as if, what would be the matziv if I was in my house? Would I leave my house? Which we'll try to clarify in a moment. But now already it takes away a little bit of the shaila. Teishvu ke'ein taduru said that this is the tzuras mitzvah. So nobody could come along and say, what do you mean? I don't understand. My wife sits in the mitzvah, in the sukkah, and she's not chayiv. So me, I'm mitzdayer, and you don't let me sit in the sukkah? The answer is pasha. She's sitting in a sukkah, she's doing the mitzvah of sukkah. But if it's a case of where you're actually mitzdayer, so then mitzdayer is not the tzura of the mitzvah, because the mitzvah is to do the way you would be in your house. And if you would be suffering in your house, you would leave your house, and that's Agdara. Be very careful before you say mitzdayer patim in HaSukkah. But if you'd be in your house and you would leave as a result of this type of a issue that you'd have, so then who are in the sukkah, that's called, that's not the kiyum of the tzura, that's not the tzura of mitzvah. The Mordechai in Tafshin Mem, he quotes the Uraim, he explains that mitzdayer patim in HaSukkah means that you're going to be saved from the problem. But let's say, for example, a person has a toothache. Dreadful toothache. And now what? Now he says, oh, I'm mitzdayer patim sukkah. You might as well be in the sales to denusa. Fakert. If you have a terrible toothache, what would you do if you were in your house and you had a toothache? You'd stay in your house and moan. So go to the sukkah and moan. So you're not being saved from the actual problem, your toothache, etc. Well, I frek the marik. So then what was the havamina by an ovel? It's a kishmak avard, l'chayr by an ovel. What was the havamina? He's an ovel, he's suffering in the house and he's suffering in the sukkah. So what was the havamina b'chlal? That he has the p'tur of a mitzdayer patim in a sukkah. So they say no, because since he's an ovel and the sukkah is a matziv and everybody's there, etc. So maybe you would have heard, look, the guy wants to be himself, he wants to be alone. And therefore, he would have solved somewhat his problem if he wouldn't be in the sukkah. Komash Malan, now his sukkah. So, that's not enough of a reason. That's a self-imposed. The Gemara understands that that's something that a person can get out of. But the idea is very clear. Mitzdayer patim in a sukkah is if there's something about the externality, the mosquitoes, the rain, the sun, the heat, the cold, etc., that's causing you that the same way if I'd be in my house, I would not be able to remain in my house. So then you're pater from the mitzvah. You're not being mekayim the mitzvah, and therefore, basically, with this agdara, a lot of things are very, very muzbar. In other words, first of all, says the Mordechai, the level of how I would define the amount of mitzdayer is at what point I would leave my house. But you can't just be quick to say mitzdayer. The Mefarshim explained, let's say a person, it starts drizzling, he's not sure. So Chazal tell us, Mishitisrach on mikveh, we'll see in a minute, it's a certain amount that it ruins the food, but I don't know how much it would ruin the food. So the gather is, at what point, if I was eating and all of a sudden it was dripping onto my table, at what point would I leave? At what point would I leave? And don't forget, it doesn't mean at what point would you leave to your kitchen. Like we explained last time from the buchacha, I would get up from my living room in a second and go to my kitchen. But we saw that the Marsham, I think actually the Marshag, excuse me, if you want to know where the Marshag is, it's Marshag is in Chelik Aleph, Siman Lamed Gimel. He says, at what point would you get up and leave, not to go to your kitchen, which is easy, and not to go to a neighbor that you don't like, which is too extreme? At what point would you get up, leave your house, and go to like a machsan, go to a garage? In other words, it's raining in my house, and that's my option. I could stay in my house when it's raining, or I could go to my garage, which is definitely not a geschmack place to be, but I won't have the raining issue. So at what point would you leave there of here and go to there? At that point, that's called that now you can't say I have Teish B'Kein Tadura, because in my house I would leave at this matzav. And if a person doesn't know, look, it's a suffix to rice l'chumrah. He's sitting in the living room and there's a mosquito, right? And he's sitting there and he's mashiga for the mosquitoes, like 10 mosquitoes are driving me crazy, the beast. So there comes a point where a person says, forget it. I'll give you an example. I had a leak in, everybody has a leak in Eretz Yisrael. At a retivut, it's called. And we had a retivut that started coming down. The rain actually started coming down, and the water was coming. I couldn't sleep. It was making a noise. I couldn't sleep. I left my room. I went out. I went to a different room. It happens to be, I had the ease. I was able to go to a different room. I started thinking that night when this happened, that at what point would I actually, let's say I wouldn't have a different room to go into. My kids, Baruch Hashem, they're in yeshiva, so I took their bed. But at what point would I have said, I have like a garage, I'll go and sleep in the garage? At what point would I just brave it and put the thing over my head and gamarnu? It's not so pashit. And if you're misupik, so then, it's like any suffix deraisa l'chumra. But this is the Agdara. The Agdara is that it's Teishvu Ke'ein Tadura. At what point would I leave my house? Therefore, there's no mitzvah. So you can't ask the kasha, but my wife sits in the sukkah. Yes, she sits in the sukkah when it's a sukkah. And this is why Rabbi say, the mashal, that person has to be very careful before he says it. Because if he says, oh, I can't sleep in the sukkah because it's mamish, ganovim, and I'm scared, and I'm cold, and I'm this. So we know, it's brought down, Chumrah and Tafresh Mem Siv Daled, that you have to be very careful before you say that. Because if you have a place that's not Kein Taduru, if you build a house in a knife and you can't sleep, then what's Kein Taduru about it? And there's a big tzad in the Bishayim in the Paiskim that you might not be right to the mitzvah. Now, derech agav, let's say a person has a sukkah, which is a sleeping sukkah, and he has another sukkah, which is an eating sukkah. Totally separate sukkah. And the sleeping sukkah you can't eat in, and the eating sukkah you can't sleep in. There's a malkum to be mekel. Because that could be the derech. We find that all over the place. People in Hanukkah had places where they ate and places where they slept. So that could be that we're able to dan that this person has made for himself a matziv. And avada, we're aware that there's a limit chos of the people that don't sleep in a sukkah. We spoke maybe last time. You have to say it's not possible to build such a house. Okay, not our sukkah right now. The Shar Tshuva Derech Agav says that if you have a sleeping sukkah and an eating sukkah, then you don't have this problem of the Rishonim. But now Rabbi Isa, you can understand something about it. The Rosh in Siman Yud Beis says that there was a tzad that a person was potter because of the Derech Agav. The Rosh says something I should speak out. The Rosh says that there was a tzad that a person was potter because of the odor. There was a bad odor, and therefore he's potter mitzvah potter min sukkah. So the Rosh asked the kasha, how did he build the sukkah in a place where there was a bad odor? So the Rosh says, you have to say that no, it happened afterward. Either the odor came afterward, or the rain went onto the schach and it made it smell. But you can't build a sukkah in a place where there's a bad odor, because then you're building it in a place of where your entire mitzvah of the sukkah is not going to be a teish b'kein to do a dika sukkah, right? You have to build a sukkah in an oifen of where you can have that enjoyment of it. Now, the Maisa, the Rosh quotes a sefer mitzvah is a smag that the only, and this is shocking. Mom is shocking. Most people don't know this. It's not HaLACHAH, but there's a smag that says that the ptur of mitztayer potter min sukkah is only for sleeping, and it's gevaldik and meduyik. The Gemara only discusses sleeping. The Gemara never discusses eating. The Korban Nestanel explains as Yivkot in Mem, because eating is a short time. So therefore you could survive a short time. But sleeping, it's not negay. I can't sleep if there's the heat, the sun, the mosquitoes, the freezing, the whatever, the rain. I can't sleep. But there's a tzad like that, ad kedei in the Rishonim, that mitztayer is only potter from sleeping. If you can't sleep, that's already a gross star. But eating, a person, you know, you could push yourself and you'll be able to do it. The Shulchan Aruch is coming, of course, lafuke there, right? The Shulchan Aruch. But now we see, Rabbi Isai, this is why from the Mishnah you would have no raya to the Chiddush of Rava. Because the Mishnah is talking about rain. Oh, rain, you can hear a big chilik. Rain is pashit. Rain is a grois tzar. Because Yoav says, rain is a tzar gadol. That's a Mishnah. Rava extended the heter of the Mishnah and said, not enough just the rain. Rain is a grois tzar. Even less. And there's another mahalach you could say over here, which I say to the Olam. I hope the Olam saw on Tafresh Lamed Tes and Sivkot. Hey, we know there's a big raid about sleeping, about eating in the sukkah on the first night. We all know there's a Shava, Tesvav, and you have to make sure you eat in the sukkah on the first night. Okay, what happens if it's raining? So they asked the Shiloh to the Rashba in Chelik Dalid, what's the din if on the first night it's raining? Do I have to eat in the sukkah? The Rashba said, I'd never heard of such a Shiloh. Of course, you don't have to eat in the sukkah if it's raining on the first night. Why should the first night be any different? The mitzvah is to eat in a sukkah, and if you're eating in a place where it's raining, it's not teishvu kain taduru. The Gra, when he explains this Rashba, this Shulchan Aruch, he says it with a slightly different nusach. He says, if it's raining in the sukkah, lav sukkah, it's ein shame sukkah olav. It doesn't have a shame of a sukkah. As a male, the Rashba, what's the din on the first night if it's raining? Should I continue eating in the sukkah? So the Rashba says it's not taduru, and therefore, of course not. And the Goyin says, of course not. You know why? Because it's not a sukkah. You're not eating in a sukkah when it has rain. The basic minimum requirement of this dira rai is that you should be able to sit there, you should be able to eat there, you should be able to sleep there. So at the time of when I'm not able to sleep there, I'm not able to eat there, it doesn't have a shame of a sukkah. Yesh Ladin, the Goyim was only talking about rain, because maybe that's the Chiddush of Rava. Maybe the Chiddush of Rava is that if I have a sukkah that keeps out that at least it keeps out, it's not raining now. So that's a shame of a sukkah. Is Mechadish Rava, okay, but there's another p'tor, Teishu Kain Taduru. It can't be a matzav of mosquitoes and things like that I'd leave my house for. But the Chiddush of the Mishnah was more pashut. If it's pashut not shaykh to sit there because it's raining again, ain't shame sukkah alav. Now, we all know that halacha l'maisa, this is not pashut. It's not pashut because halacha l'maisa, there are those that say no, the din of mitzdayer, that's not a p'tur on the first night. I'm not going to go into this now. Maybe it's an Andramah we'll talk about, but the din of mitzdayer is not a din on the first night. And memela you're chayiv to sit, and you sit in the sukkah even when it's raining, and that's what we do. How long do you have to wait? And whatnot, okay? But the Maisa, we do try, and we try to, and if there's no brayer, you sit, and you have at least a kedayis. We'll have to talk about this another time. If it's once a shayla like this, it rained on the first night of sukkah. You can enjoy the shayla much more now. It rained on the first night of sukkah. No, so what could you do? The family ate the first kedayis, and what could you do? And the gate that I. Then it was the middle of the night. And the father goes over to his child, he wakes him up. He says, Yingala, it stopped raining. So he says, Ta, I'm sleeping. He says, no, but it stopped raining. We got to go to the sukkah to eat. So the Yingala said, look, we ate in the sukkah when it was raining because mitzdayer is chayiv in the sukkah on the first night. Because that's a different din. Just like we said before, birchas hamazon you have to do if you benched. There's no p'tur mitzdayer from the other mitzvahs. So this mitzvah of tesvav, there's no p'tur mitzdayer. That's a p'tur in sukkah, but there's din of... Okay, so we ate in the sukkah when we were mitzdayer. Elamai, you're saying that maybe what? Maybe, no, maybe that's a chumrah, and the Rashba says that we were putter at that point, and therefore, I should do it now. But now to get out of bed, I'm mitzdayer. So right? So the father told the son, no, because I'm choshev for the gra. The reason why before you couldn't sit in the sukkah was maybe because it didn't have the shame of a sukkah on it when the rain was coming down. So therefore, before when we did it, okay, that was a ganzel chumrah, but maybe it was worthless because it didn't even have a shame of a sukkah. But now all you have is mitzdayer, and maybe mitzdayer is chayiv on the first night. Just what to think about in the sukkah, Rabbi say. Balkapanim. This Rabbi say is the basic akdama to the sukkah, to the sugya, and this is really sviv all the halachas now in Shulchan Aruch. that the vada, a bad odor, we paskin is pater min HaSukkah. If it's raining, it's pater min HaSukkah, etc. Right? And for shtetzach, everybody on their own now has to try to figure out what's the mitzvah pater min HaSukkah. Let's say he has a situation of where there's noise and he can't sleep, etc. You got to be not so quick to say mitzvah pater min HaSukkah. But Amevin Yavin, if a person can't sleep and it's loud and the noise and people are making simchas beis shuevas and whatever, so then he can't sleep. He can't sleep. And then Chanami, maybe he would leave his room. But if in your room you would put in the earplugs, don't be quick to say mitzvah pater min HaSukkah. And if in your room when it was cold you'd put on an extra blanket, don't be fast to say mitzvah pater min HaSukkah. You know, I always say, like I said last time, the Trumas Hadeshin talks about the size of a sukkah, which is 7 by 7. We're talking about a groisa yid, and he has to sit in a sukkah, and he has to sleep in a sukkah. And Alpha Beacon, he's not pater. I say mitzvah, he's all curled up and cuddled. So the Trumas Hadeshin says, Amol, you would sleep like that. Okay, that's a chiddush, right? But you got to be careful before you say mitzvah pater min HaSukkah. Last time we explained it. It has to be that not the chefts of sukkah is what's giving you mitzvah, because I don't like sleeping outside, because I don't like sleeping in a small area. It has to be that there's something out there, but it certainly is not so pashut to say mitzvah pater min HaSukkah. And again, cold and whatnot, each person on his own has to figure out at what point is he considered a mitzvah pater min HaSukkah. And this is why, you know, there was definitely a minig Yisrael that the many people slept outside the sukkah because of the cold, etc. But you have to know today, a person, he has a sukkah, he builds it right off of his house and it's very enclosed, and he could have the air conditioning, either the cold going into the sukkah or the heat going into the sukkah. So you have to know, you have to be very careful before you say mitzvah pater min HaSukkah. Now there's something very interesting. What happens if you have a case like this? Like every year, it's Friday night, and somebody pulls the plug on the electricity, and the light goes out in the sukkah. Okay, there you are, it's pitch black. Okay, so if you have the lights from the street or whatever, it's in your backyard, pitch black. Is that mitzvah pater min HaSukkah? So the Trumas Hadeshin in Simon Tzadi Gimel, he says, you don't eat in the darkness. Adrabah, there's a kapeda, bedafka, it's not simchas yontif, and therefore you're mitzvah and you're pater. And don't be a chacham and say, I'll be machmir and I'll sit in the sukkah, because you're mitzvah, you're pater, and if you make a bracha, it's a bracha l'vatala. You're making a bracha in a sukkah, which isn't a sukkah, which isn't teishvah kein tadur. Okay. And the Mishnah Berurah brings this, and he says it's derech to be mitzvah, don't be machmir, etc. But the only thing is, but now, so do I have to go to a neighbor? I have to go to a neighbor. And my neighbor, his grandson didn't yet pull out the light in the sukkah. So do I say you have to go to a neighbor? So there's the Trumas Hadeshin discusses this, and he says, listen, a person, he certainly would prefer to be in his own domain, and he brings a raya from Chalamoyed that the person could even on Chalamoyed move from a better dira to a worse dira if it's his own dira, because the person prefers to be living by himself and he doesn't feel comfortable sleeping and eating by somebody else. But he concludes that it's not pashut, right? And that if you don't have such a major busha of eating in front of the other guy, then maybe you should eat in front of the other. You should go to your neighbor's house. Ad Kedei, the Pikura Yankiv in Sivkot and Yud Gimel, he says the fact that I have to pack everything up now and go to my neighbor's house, that's, listen to his lashon, that's not called sar, that's tircha. Tircha for a mitzvah is a virtue. If all I have to do is be matriach myself to bring all my stuff, that was the person walking down 15 flights of stairs. But if when I'm going to be in the sukkah, I'm going to enjoy myself, then you don't have heter mitzvah pater min HaSukkah. The heter mitzvah pater min HaSukkah says that when I'm in the sukkah, I'm going to have a hard time. I'm going to have an unenjoyable experience. I wouldn't eat in that matzav. I wouldn't sleep in that matzav. But let's say I just have to be matriach to get there. L'fum tzara agra, and tircha is a mile in the mitzvah. And yes, you do have to try to go there. Now, and the Chayyadam brings this in Kupam Zayin, Tzikot and Yud Aleph. He says, look, if it's a little bit of busha, if there's a major busha, the B'tzel Chachma talks about a person that he has a busha to eat in front of other people. He says some hygiene problem or something like that. That's a real mitzvah pater min HaSukkah, which you understand. If he doesn't have, and the only sukkah that he has is with other people, and he always eats himself, okay, so that you could say. But if your only issue is that there's a tircha, if your only issue is is that there's a tircha to do the mitzvah, but when I'll be there, I'll enjoy the mitzvah. Then don't be so quick to claim mitztayer pater min sukkah. What would be, Rabbi Isai, if you were in a house, if you walked into a town and you were starving, hungry? So what would you do? Just starve? No, you'd look for the first mezuzah, and it's not so comfortable. And what could you do? And if you tell me no, I would look for the first mezuzah and ask him, do you have food, and eat it outside. So then if you're somebody that won't be able to eat with somebody else, right? Or I don't know your neighbors, verstehst? So you have to know, but don't be quick to be saying this. And this is why I mentioned before that some Sefer says in Tafresh Mem, if you have no sukkah, you have to try hard to build one, and you can't say mitztayer pater min sukkah. What would be the halacha about? Let's talk for a moment like this. Let's say same thing. Lefi this would I have to try to avoid? Let's say it rained in my sukkah, and now I want to know, should I take a towel and wipe the schach? Or do I say, look, it's dripping now, and I'm at mitztayer pater min sukkah? So lefi this, of course you have to wipe the schach. Avad you have to try to wipe the schach. Avad you have to try to get the mitzvah. If when I'll be in the sukkah, I'll be enjoying myself, so then avad. Now there are rules that once, and that's a Gemara, once I went in because of the rain, there are rules that we're not matriach you. The Mishabura, the Bialacha learns that once I settled inside already, we're not matriach you to be chayzer. Now that you can understand. The HaSukkah explains that's for a different reason. That's because once you've already left, that's not teishvu king to duru to make a person be a yo-yo, back, forth. That's already not teishvu king to duru. If you just walked in and it stops raining, and chanami, go back. But if you already walked inside and we're going to tell a person, that's already not the king to do. That if I have to leave the sukkah because it's uncomfortable, we're not going to tell you that when you're in the middle of your meal, come back to the meal. That's already also. But to actually be matriach milachatchila for the mitzvah, that for sure we're going to tell the person milachatchila. Very interesting, Rabbi Sal. Throw in something which is a mitzvah farson, perhaps. It's a mitzvah, and the Matei Frank says this, to make sure you have on your sukkah a shlak, a cover on your sukkah. What's the reason why? So Pashut, because after it rains, you're gonna be able to take off the shlak and you'll be able to sit in the sukkah, which avada, it's a big maila, right? But there's something that's not so known. There's a Rabbeinu Tam whose shita is taka brought la halacha in Tafresh Chavtes. Over there, Rabbeinu Tam brings down, there's a whole shaila. If I made a sukkah bekashrus, and then afterward, this is Taisus brings in a few places in Dafyud and other places in Sukkah. Whoever learned Nesach the Sukkah remembers this, Rabbeinu Tam. Let's say I build a Sukkah B'Kashrus, and then afterward I put on it a sadin, I put on it some type of a shmata. Rabbeinu Tam's shita is that if it was built B'Kashrus, then it doesn't become puzzle. The only time that we say schach puzzle can create a problem is if it wasn't yet kosher. But if the sukkah was kosher, and now fakir, I'm putting on the shlak to protect the schach, so then fakir, it's batal, it's enhancing the schach, and it's tuffle to the schach because it's doing something for the schach. He's still to the mitzvah. You hear this ma'aser by side. You can sit in a sukkah with the shlak on, according to Rabbeinu Tam, you're getting the mitzvah. Mamish, who brings this Rabbeinu Tam, the Mogen Avram, the Prima Garden, the Machzor Shekel, the Mishabura, the Bikur Yaakov, they all say, if it rains, put on the shlak and remain in the sukkah. Somebody had a shaila. He put on the shlak, he was in the sukkah, he ate, and then he takes off the schach. Does he make another bracha? Rabbi say, now, according to Rabbeinu Tam, he doesn't make another bracha because he was getting the mitzvah. The vada, he doesn't make another bracha. Maybe even he should sit in the sukkah. He should remain in the sukkah. And that's a very, very important thing, Rabbi say. Very, very important thing to try to get the mitzvah. We're talking the whole entire day about mitztayer pater min sukkah, but now you see that adarabah. We have to go out of our way to try and get the mitzvah of sukkah. Had kedei to be sitting with a shlak, because if you're sitting with a shlak, adarabah, you might be getting the mitzvah according to the shita Rabbeinu Tam. They ask a shaila. The Einik Yontif asks a shaila. He says, "Wait a minute, but if I'm sitting in a sukkah in an oifin of where I'm not getting the mitzvah." So then maybe you're getting hana from the walls. Excuse me. Maybe you're getting hana from the walls. And if you're getting hana from the walls, so then perhaps that's considered a problem of muksel mitzvasai, because you're not getting the mitzvah if you're sitting in the rain, and you're not getting the mitzvah and you're still being mishtamish. So that the Welt says that it's not changing the shimush of the item, but here the fear of ben adam is even better. I'm actually getting the mitzvah if the shlach is on. Therefore, that is definitely a maila. That certainly is a maila. Now, sorry, but now, what about learning? What about learning in the sukkah? So we saw already that certainly if it's difficult for you to learn, let's say be'in, it's hard to concentrate, etc., and certainly if it's going to cause bittul Torah, then he should certainly not learn in the sukkah, right? If it's causing bittul Torah, then obviously there's no maila. It's much better that what he should do is go inside and learn in the base medrash. And the truth is, it's quite difficult to figure out the Rebbe Kiva Eger even in the base medrash, kal v'chomer in the sukkah when everyone's around. However, if a person, for him, there's no difference. He builds a private sukkah. So then, of course, there's a maila, right? But if he can't. And that's why the Taz says this is why we daven in the shul. Because, it's not shayach. This is where he davens the whole year, and that's what he davens with an oilam, etc. So for Shtetzach, we're not going to tell him that he should daven b'chidas, that chalila. But we're not even going to say that a person should daven with a minion in the sukkah, because it's easier to have a normal tzuras of davening in the shul. So then that would not be a ke'ein taduru. That's not ke'ein taduru. Same thing with the base medrash. If it's not normal for him, he doesn't learn in the haim. He doesn't learn so much in the house. Even though when you learn in the house, Rabbi say it's fire insurance, says the Shulchan Aruch and Yeredeya in Siman Reish Mem Vav. Okay, but al kapanim, kol bayis sheish bo Torah will not have fire. But al kapanim, he doesn't learn in the house. It's harder for him to learn in the house, certainly in the daytime, certainly in chalamoyed and etc. So for such a person, it's no shaila that he could learn in the base medrash. Now here I have a little bit of a kasha. And I'm happy I saw today that the HaRav has the kasha. Over there's a Mogen Avram that discusses, let's say you're going to have to schlep all your svarim to the sukkah, and it's a ganze schlep, and it's a ganze kriech, and dust. So the Mogen Avram says, maybe it's mitztayer potter min sukkah. This to me was a tzarchin, and I see the HaRav and Tzivkat in your text asks the shaila, based on what we said, this is a tzarchin. We said that, what do you mean? There's no mitztayer potter min sukkah if what you're doing is just to get to the mitzvah. The only time there's mitzvah put from the sukkah is when you have a situation where you'll be in the sukkah and let's say I won't be able to concentrate in the sukkah. So then we say you're mitzvah put in a sukkah. But if I am able to concentrate in the sukkah, it's just a kriech to get there. It's very annoying to get there. So then I didn't realize that on such a case there's a mitzvah put in a sukkah. That's l'fum tzara agra. Okay, but that's our Shulchan already has the kasha. Maybe you could say that since it's not eating and it's not sleeping, it's not something that be'etzim bisoid you're chayiv in. It's not that the sukkah is mechayiv, like eating and sleeping, the sukkah is mechayiv. So maybe here, maybe we do misyaches to the mitzvah, but it's a little bit of a tzarchian. Now, the what we spoke to there, Rabbi Isai, you can understand something else. We know that there were many tzaddikim that they stayed in the sukkah even when it rains. And this is very shver. It's a hedget. It's not what Hashem wants. No, Hashem is pouring down water, and this was a mashal to an eved that he brings water, and Hashem is throwing back the water. So B'kai Govna, what's this? Mazev al Mazeh, that we find that we know all the doiris, there were tzaddikim, that they remained even when it was cold, even when it was raining, etc. But the what we said that we saw today, and I see afterward that if I'm not mistaken, the Munkatcher, one moment, the Shvus Yankiv, no less than the Shvus Yankiv, that in Gimel Mem Hey, no, excuse me, I didn't write down, I think it was in the Marshag. But he asks, what's the pshat that we know that the tzaddikim, they would eat in the sukkah and they sleep in the sukkah even when it was dreadful weather, etc., etc. So the what we explained today explains Gavaldik. These tzaddikim, what's the whole heter of Teshuvah came to do? That it's only a heter like by the toothache. If when you go in the house, are you going to get rid of the toothache? No. So then you have no heter to leave the sukkah. these tzaddikim, telling them to leave the sukkah was so much agmas nefesh. They wanted to be in the seltzer, the nusa, etc. So they felt so much agmas nefesh that they weren't going to benefit or gain anything by going inside. Because when they would go inside, they would have the same agmas nefesh, if not more, telling these HaLACHAH Yidden. So the Memela, there's no point in them going inside. They might as well be outside in the sukkah, and they might as well suffer in the sukkah because they're going to suffer more inside, side by side. Now, the Fida Gra, this doesn't work so well. Because the Fida Gra, it's lav shem sukkah. So you're not doing a mitzvah, so you're a hedget, right? But maybe Hagufa, maybe Akama, they're able to stay in the sukkah and the rain is not bothering them. So then it does have a shame sukkah. But that yeshlatim, because I think it is bothering them. It just bothers them more inside. No. Now, the actual rain itself, the actual halachas of rain, excuse me. So the Chazal tell us that it's Misha Tisrach HaMikveh, like we explained. And if you don't know how much that is, so Chazal tell us, the Ramaz says, if you don't know, it's the amount that you would go in when it was raining. Obviously, for food, it takes a little bit longer. For sleep, once it's drizzling, there's nobody who's going to sit in the sukkah when it's going to be drizzling. It's Ad Kedei that the Beis Yosef brings in the end of Tafresh Lametes a ran, that the ran has a shayla. The shayla is, let's say you didn't go into the sukkah yet. Let's say you didn't even go into the sukkah yet. And you see it's about to rain. So he declares maybe this shear of Misha Tisrach HaMikvah, maybe the shear of Misha Tisrach HaMikvah, of the amount that it spoils the food or whatnot, maybe that's only once I'm in the sukkah. When you're in the sukkah, to make a guy leave the sukkah, it has to be something substantial. But to not go in, that's definitely not taduru. I would not go into my house in this matzav. I wouldn't go into that room lechatchila in this matzav. So Iran says it's a good svara, but he's mesupik to be soymech on his svara. And the Chayadim and the Rebaz, they say, even if you didn't leave your house yet, you can't be so quick to say mitzdayer patam sukkah, and that the rain, it has to be the level of Misha Tisrach HaMikvah. Now let's say it started raining, but there's no food yet. Now, obviously, it's not a shear in an amount of rain. It's a mitzias. And the fact that you don't have food, obviously, if the rain is bothering you, so for shteitzach, you're allowed to go inside. But there's an incredible chiddush in Rosh Shlomo Kluger in Tafresh Lametes and Sivkat and Hay. He says that let's say you have heavy schach, and the rain didn't come into your schach yet, and your neighbor, yes, shvach schach, and the rain is coming in and going to everybody else's schach. So he says, in that case, no bracha. If you're in a sukkah and the rain is not bothering you at all, because you have thick schach, and it's already at the point where it's bothering all of your neighbors, and it's pouring down, he says, then when you stay in your sukkah, no bracha. He says, why? Because it's already an amount of rain that stares, so then you're already patur min sukkah. This, Rabbi Yisai, is a big pella, a big tema. The fact that it's bothering my neighbors, it's not bothering me. I saw one nachar, and he wants to say, well, maybe the pshat is that here you have a matzah where the master is spilling water all over. So you're sitting there in your sukkah. I'd say the answer is yes. He's spilling water on everybody else, and he's not spilling on me, right? And derech agav, it's not so pashut at what point we say that it's a siman klala. Some say it's only on the first night, because you have to stay there. Some say it's only a klala in Eretz Yisrael. Some say it's only a klala on the other nights. Some because dafka on the first night you're going to be there anyways. Some say it depends what time of the season it is. Some say it's only a sudden downpour. So that's really not such a pashut azach. That's not a pashut a problem. And I saw that the Zara Emes in Tafkov Chavhei, he says pashut if it's very heavy raining. And he had a case over there that it seemed to be that it was terrible rain before Yom Tov. Before Yom Tov, it was terrible rain. And all the sukkahs were still wet. It was terrible rain, and all the sukkahs are still wet. It is dripping. So he declares, are you allowed to? But there were a few ashirim that they had this sukkah that was built in a way where the rain didn't come in. So he says, are they patur? So he says, of course they're not patur. He says he doesn't know any tzad in the world. Why should they be patur? Why? The fact that they don't have this problem, of course they're not patur. And the Marshag in Beis Ayin Aleph, he talks about that case that we spoke about, that a person remained in the sukkah, and when it was raining, right? And they put on the shlak, and then they rolled up the shlak. And he dons, you need a new bracha. He dons that you could don that just like at night when a person was wearing tzitzis, so Betzim requires a new bracha because it was a zman of ptur. So Marshak says it's not a zman of ptur. It's you have a technical problem that your schach doesn't block the rain, but it's not a zman of ptur. And therefore he says, so for shtetzach, if you sat in the sukkah, like Rabbeinu Tam that I said, if you put a shlak on, anyways, you're mekayim the mitzvah. But even without that, it's not a zman of ptur, so therefore it's not called a HaSukkah. And therefore, he says, you don't make a new bracha. But his mashal is gewaldig. He says, hayitachin, let's say you have thick schach. Are you going to tell me that you are not chayiv in the sukkah? It was pashut by him. It was mamish the pashtus that if you have thick schach, then avada your putter from then avada your chayiv in the sukkah. And it goes the other way too. Let's say you have thin schach. So then for shtetzach, if your schach is thin and now it's raining, so then you're putter. The fact that somebody else, he's chayiv, what does that have to do with you? And not only that, let's say you have a part of your sukkah that it's not raining in. So the Bikur Yankiv and Sivkot and Chavtes says, go to that part, sit on that area. Right? And the Rav Chatzkel Abramsky's Medayik into Tosefta, it says, Yorid Olav Geshem. The rain was going on him. So this Rabbi Isai is the basic idea of when rain patters, like I mentioned before, that certainly if it's wet, the schach, you should take a towel, even on Yontif. Just you're not moving it b'yadayim, you're doing tiltum etzad, and you should dry the schach, so that you should be able to get this mitzvah. Like I said, the shear of sleeping is right away. The big shaila that everybody has every year is that you know it might rain. Either you know from the weather report, or let's go in order. Let's say right now it's drizzling, right? It's drizzling in the sukkah. So right now it's not shver. The sukkah is not a problem right now. I could technically eat there. It's drizzling. It's not a problem, right? But the shaila is like this. So you're mistama your chayiv in the mitzvah sukkah. But could you make a bracha? I mean, how could you say that's Teshu Kain Taduru when nobody in there would ever remain in this matzav? You know the matzav is about to end. So I saw the Birchas Abayis. He says, no, right now you're not mitzvah patim in a sukkah. So therefore, yes, make a bracha. It's enough time to finish a kazayis and make a bracha. But I saw the Bikur Yankiv said that that's not pashit because don't forget, we saw once the Ran says that if it's a matziv of where, even though we didn't paskin the Ran, but the Ran had a suffix, so you're not going to make a bracha. We saw that the Ran has a case of where nobody's going to go into the sukkah, this matziv, when it starts drizzling. Nobody would go into his house in this matziv. The Ran was mesupik about that. So generally, we take on that if it starts drizzling, you might still be chayiv in the mitzvah, not for sleeping, but for eating. You might be chayiv in the mitzvah, but to make a bracha, you certainly would have to be chayshish for the tzad that it's not kein taduru in this matziv, and that no one would go
like the first night, like the first night, like
the first night is different.
No, but those poskim say even the first night you don't make the bracha.
But they're talking where it's pouring.
You're talking about drizzling versus pouring.
I'm talking about like a drizzling where you know it's about to get worse. So, but right now I don't have the ptur of mitzvah. So there we have that svar of the Ran. Yeah, but if you know that something's about to get worse, nobody in their right mind would go lechatchila into this matziv. So we don't paskin like that. But to make a bracha, I'd be chayshish, and see the Bikur Yankiv is chayshish that you can't make a bracha. For example, let's say you know rain is imminent. You know how it is. You see it's black in the sky. You know rain is imminent. And I know that they say you can't rely on the weather reports, but I don't know. I think they're getting better. I mean, they used to say 30 years ago and 20 years ago, and they're always wrong. I don't know. I get very nervous going to sleep that night when I know that I'm going to be waking up wet. Right? That's not geschmack. So there is a marsham in the Das Torah that he says, look, there's a ritva that's makel, and if you know it's going to rain, then you're pater. He says the ritva is a chiddush. He says, but certainly you can't make a bracha. Certainly can't make a bracha. If you know it's about to rain, he says you certainly can't make a bracha. And the sleeping shaila is a very big shaila, because you know that the weather report says that at 3 a.m. it's going to rain. I have this shaila at least once a year. We have the shaila in Eretz Yisrael. And you know at 3 a.m. it's going to rain. They tell you 3 a.m. it's going to rain. Now I must tell you, sometimes it does rain, sometimes it doesn't. or maybe I just don't know and I slept through it. Right. So this is a shver shaila. There is a makim to be makel, and it's definitely makim to be machmer. And the medaktikim, they certainly try to be machmer on this shaila, but it is definitely not a pasha to shaila. Do you have to wait? Let's say I go into the water, I go into the sukkah now, and it is not raining. It's raining, and therefore I'm potter. Do I have to wait? Pashtus is, it's not the first night. If you wait, you're a tzaddik. This wouldn't be a hedjit. Hedjit is that when you're in the sukkah and you're suffering in the sukkah. But if I'm waiting, that's a tzaddik. That's a tzaddik. That's a yid with savlanis. He wants to wait for the mitzvah. You're not mechuyev to, but certainly it would be a maila to wait. Right? So this Rabbi Isai is in a nutshell. I want to leave the oilam with a little bit of time to be able to ask shilas. But I think you see over here that the basic idea of Isai is that it's clear mitzdayer is pater min sukkah. Tircha for the mitzvah is a maila. Mitzdayer in the sukkah is not a maila, because then it's not teishva came to duru. Tircha, to have to, should a person have savlanis and wait? If he's willing to, for sure. Does he have to go to a neighbor? If he's not embarrassed and it's just a tircha, so then tircha in a mitzvah is a maila. Right? Is that a raya? What your wife sits in the sukkah and gets a mitzvah? Of course not, because that's the actual mitzvah. Machenkin, if you're in a sukkah and it's raining, the Goyin says it's not even called a sukkah. Lav shem sukkah, love, and certainly it's a mitzdayer. If you have a tzaddik and he enjoys the sukkah so much that he can't even think about going inside, so perhaps he's not gaining anything, and that's the Agdara. The Agdara is that in order to pater from the sukkah, you have to gain. You had a toothache in the sukkah, you can't go in the house because you're not going to gain anything from it. So Mamela, we're going to tell you to at least you might as well suffer in the selsa demnusa. If it didn't start raining yet, could you claim mitzdayer pater min sukkah? It's not pashit, and certainly shouldn't make a bracha. Should you invest in a shlak? Zicher, because when you're going to sit in the sukkah, according to Rabbeinu Tam, you're getting the mitzvah. Kipshuta and the Mishabura brings this la'alacha, the Magen Avraham, the Bikur Yanka, the Pri Megadim, they all bring this la'alacha. And certainly if you did sit in there and after you roll it up, so then you're certainly not going to make another bracha. That's v'vadai. Now, derech agav, you could be mechalik between those roofs that come down. That's already maybe a whole new maisa. That's not what Rabbeinu Tam was talking about, because you can't say your house is bottled to your schach. This Rabbi say, but I think at least the maisa, we have to see, we learn from here, you have to be very, very careful before we say mitzdayer pater min sukkah. If it will be a mitzdayer, then avada, it would be a hedjit, and avada, halavai, that the etzim limit will make it that the Rebbeinu Shalom will see our ritzaynus to sit and tell to them nusa, and it won't give us any tzar this year in the HaLACHAH.
How much, a couple of questions, Rav, quickly. How much is a person required to spend money do you have to spend a lot of money on heaters to try to
Okay, so this we spoke last time. It's an extremely important nekuda. Last time we spoke about that, I mentioned from a Pri Megadim that he declares, the question is very important. The question is, how much money does a person have to spend to make sure that he has a beautiful sukkah, a sukkah that's starless, no cold can get in, and heaters and this and that or whatever. So I gave a Gedara last time that maybe we should say chaimish, 20% of his nechasim, right? Like any mitzvah, 10% at least according to Rabbeinu Yerucham. But here there's a Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim wants to say chiddush that maybe you have to dan how much would I spend to have a 7-day dira, and not more than that. In other words, there's a teishva game to do. It's a dira for 7 days, but how much would I spend to have a dira that I could live in for 7 days, right? Which is basically, a motel or whatever. So you're not going to be necessarily mechuyev to spend till chaimish of your money. Right? I was trying to think today, like, what would I do? And my other option would be like, I'd have to just like sleep by friends or whatever, and uncomfortable, or in my car or whatever, right? How much would a person be willing to spend? That's the amount that he has to be willing to spend on a sukkah. Now, I know when you hear what I'm saying, it sounds like in practicality, it sounds like a big chumrah, because most of us would definitely spend $1,000, or I don't know the number, right? Certainly spend a certain amount of money. We would spend. But it's a bit of a shver shaila. I don't know. You could say not like this Pri Megadim, and maybe you'll say that no, the Torah said make a dir arai. Okay, I did something which it's not vaday gonna have tsar, it's not vaday gonna have cold, it's not vaday gonna have mosquitoes. I did the normal building of this dir arai. If you did it in a way where vaday there'll be cold and vaday mosquitoes, then stomach you have to do the first hagdara. But let's say I built it in a way where it's not valid that there's going to be mosquitoes. It could happen. It'll happen sometimes during Sukkah. So maybe this Dira Sarai does have that sometimes during Sukkot, it has mitzvah, but not, 50% of the time, but 10% of the time. Maybe that's normal for a sukkah to have that 10% of the time you have the p'tur of mitzvah patim and a sukkah. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? That's a very important akuda. Maybe it's normal in a dira sarai that 10% of the time of a dira sarai, there is a p'tur of mitzvah patim and a sukkah. Now the question is what's your threshold? If somebody's going to come along and say, no, it's normal to build the dira sarai that 80% of the time will be mitzvah patim and a sukkah. I'm not sure if that's true. And maybe somebody will say I'm being too machmir by saying 10% of the time. Maybe somebody will say it's normal to have a dira arai that you can't. It's not shaykh. It's normal to have a dira arai that 20% of the time there's going to be mitzvah patim and a sukkah. Maybe that's licked in the mitzvah sukkah, and therefore that would be much more kulitic approach than the Pri Megadim. That's what I was thinking about this shaila, but it's a very, very difficult thing to be magder in the Chab Moira because it's a shaila of a suffix deraisa.
Okay, one last question. And this question here of how long waiting. I'm sure you still remember young children. What taka should be for the Kapsan rains the first night? So the Mishabura is not machriya 100% between the waiting versus the Simchas Yantif. How do you weigh the various nitunim there?
Mishabura, if I'm not mistaken, says something about chatzos there, no? Pretty scary lashon, no?
Right, it brings in chatzos, and they all wonder where chatzos comes from. It's not the seder. Where does chatzos come from?
Pretty scary. And
then he goes.
Pretty scary chumrah over here.
Right, big chumrah. But
there's lashon.
More lamaisa, how do you weigh a clash of mitzvahs?
How do you what?
How do you weigh this clash between the stira between two mitzvahs, the mitzvah of Simchas Yantiv and then the mitzvah of Sukkah? Emotionally, everybody wants some kind of Sukkah.
Yes, I know it's a little bit hard because the Welt has become slightly more maphonic, and you're going to tell people to wait. People can't wait today, Rabbi Gottesman. People can't concentrate today, and people can't. There's a lot of things people can't do today. So I don't know if the kid is going to come out and because of this hate the mitzvah of Sukkot, what should I tell you? But if you can make it all geschmack and whatever, it's a very schwer shayla. The Shabura. Yeah, I don't like saying the Mishpur is written for a different door, but the Mishpur says over here, Lashon. It says, yeah, it's pretty sure. In the Chamaniyah Simchas Yantif, the only thing I can tell you, Rabbi Isai, is that today we do have weather reports, and if you know b'vadai that it's going to be raining for the next 3 hours because on the computer they tell you it's going to rain for the next 3 hours, so then in the stomach you're not mechayiv to wait. Sometimes it says it's going to rain straight the whole night, and it is raining. Not that they got this one wrong. So then to make children wait in that matziv, I don't know, if I was by myself, maybe, right?
And Chaim woke up Ramesh Soloveitchik and he gave him the Manavshach, right? Famous story. He told him, Manavshach, what are you waking me up for?
Yeah.
The Manavshach that Mr. was partner and your partner.
But the Pita Gra, it's very good.
What?
Because the Pita Gra, when they ate in the sukkah, it didn't have a shame of a sukkah. So therefore, there's no Manavshach.
It's the ancient sukkah. Yeah, that's what all the Briska things quote in. But their wife and kids don't have to wait. Push the wife and kids. Wife.
The Briskers have bigger problems. I just saw Rav Yeshua's son, and he told me there's one kosher hadis in all of Yerushalayim. Don't start with the Briskers now. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
There's one kosher
hadis. They have much bigger problems.
There's one kosher hadis in Gans Yerushalayim.
One kosher hadis, and he has it. Right?
He has it.
He hasn't chap. I have 3.
I have to come shake your lulav and his lulav. Okay. Some call now. One last thing. There's zicher a chiyuv to mishtadel to make some sort of a shlak. That zicher is a chiyuv, right?
I can't say chiyuv, but the Matter Ephraim says you should. The fee what we saw today, you're tying
it to Rabbeinu Tam. You're tying Rabbeinu Tam because you can sit under the shlak. Why, according to what you said, you should try to build a shlach so you should be able to
100%.
resist the rain.
100%. The Matter Ephraim doesn't say like me. He says the fact that afterward you won't have the dripping.
Dripping, right. Let me see, it's a dripping, right. To Menadim, it's there. Okay, everybody, if you'd like to
But I got
the
it. The
rock,
next year is on the bracha. Next week is on the bracha.
next year on the bracha, I guess. It's I think we have only one year left.
That's Hashem.
Right. Are they? When there's two shiurim. We have Wednesday and we have St. Gedalia. We have two shiurim, so the Rav should calculate accordingly. We have next Wednesday and we have St. Gedalia. He went off. Okay, everybody say anybody.